Good afternoon, everyone. This is part of our research seminar series, ISID research seminar series. Today, we have a very distinguished speaker and also a distinguished panel. Dr. Koichiro Kimura, who is Senior Research Fellow and Deputy Director General at the Institute of Developing Economies, Japan, IDE, Japan. He has worked extensively and published on competition issues, industrial development, and also technology. So he would be presenting on his work, Imitation versus Differentiation, Balance between Product Similarities and Differences in a Hoteling Model. And we have a very distinguished panel to discuss the paper. We have Professor Uday Bhanu Sinha, who is senior professor at the Delhi School of Economics, who is also an expert in industrial competition, industrial strategy, and also technology transfer. He has a huge number of papers in these diverse areas. So we welcome you, sir, for being with us in this panel. We have Dr. Isha Chawla, who is a colleague of ISID, who is consultant here, but she has also worked on global production network and industrial competitiveness. So usually what we do that the key speaker would be presenting on say 20-25 minutes, and then the discussions would get, since there are two discussions, we can extend the discussion. Each of them can speak for 10-12 minutes, and then we can have question and answers. The floor will be open. So, sir, I request you to begin your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So, thank you, Chair Dr. Sakimato. Thank you very much. And good afternoon and namaskar. I'm Koichiro Kimura from the Institute of Developing Economies. Director Nagesh Kumar and Dr. Ina Saraswati. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my ideas with you. I'm very honored to be here today. And I also thank panelists Uday Bhanu Sinha and Dr. Isha Chawla, as well as everyone. Thank you for your participation. And the ISID has many scholars, especially focusing on the growth of companies and industrial development. So today, I want to take this opportunity to share my interests about the process of competition with you. Thank you. The slide was shared. This is my slides. Thank you very much. So I can ask.
You do it from the laptop? Or is already done?
So I'm interested in the impact of company behavior and the competition on industrial development. And today, based on many field trips in various countries and regions, as I will be talking today, I want to organize companies' behavior and the competition in a hoteling model. And this is the structure of today's talk. And my question is, how competition shapes industries through its influence on company behavior. Yeah, we can find many examples related to this question. For example, in the game console industry, Nintendo established a system for supplying high-quality software in the 80s to prevent the mass production of low-quality game titles. Meanwhile, Sony adopted that supply system while simultaneously enhancing console specifications to improve the expressive power of games. Next, in the smartphone industry, in the 21st century, Apple established an intuitive user interface and extensibility through third-party apps. Meanwhile, Google adopted that interface and extensibility while simultaneously promoting handset diversification through its open platform strategies. So consumers can enjoy both common convenient product characteristics and unique, interesting characteristics provided by each company. In other words, even if companies rely solely on very extreme differentiation, then consumers cannot derive utility or cannot enjoy from the fundamental product attributes or characteristics. In other words, sufficient imitation may be a prerequisite or precondition for maximizing the value of differentiation or innovation. So with precious limited business resources, companies face two contrasting strategic choices regarding market power in terms of market power. One is differentiation to increase their market power, and another is imitation to neutralize their competitors' market power, or we can say that imitation to incorporate competitors' advantage or strong points. So in other words, to what extent do companies differentiate their products while at the same time imitating competitors' products? Because both of differentiation and imitation are very important for companies' strategies. So each of them has long been regarded as an important aspect of company behavior. At first, differentiation has been studied for 1 century in the research on perfect competition and innovation, such as the location game in the address model developed by Hotelling in 1929, the location price two-stage game developed by Das Fremont, and so on, as an extension of the Hotelling model. And we can find many various applications using the Hotelling model. And on the other hand, imitation and related concepts such as technology diffusion, technology spillovers, or social learning have been studied in the research on growth theory and management studies after World War II, when technology and knowledge came to be recognized as key drivers of economic growth. However, the balance between product similarities and differences remains unclear because two behaviors are not integrated in a single model. Because in the real economy, we can define an industry as a group of companies that sell products differentiated from one another within the same industry. And they sell products that are similar when compared across different industries. So, in other words, each industry can be characterized by whether product homogeneity or heterogeneity is relatively more dominant. So we might be able to rephrase the balance as a composition of product similarities and differences. Anyway, we need to focus on the balance or composition of product similarity and product differentiations. So I analyze this balance by introducing the concept of imitation and differentiation and imitation costs into the hotel model, specifically developed by Daspremont and so on. In the original hoteling model, consumers are distributed along the line from 0 to 1 and buy the product that minimizes the disutility or transportation costs arising from the distance from between the product and the consumer's preference. And in the supply side, when two companies choose only their locations, they both locate at the center. That is minimal differentiation developed by their model. However, when they choose both location and price in the two-stage game model, they locate at the endpoints. That is maximum differentiation. This is the result, major result of the Daspremont and so on model. So because companies choose only the degree of differentiation, the resulting relative degree of differentiation from the previous studies is observable, but the degree of imitation is not explicitly specified in the previous models. So in my model, assuming that company 1 and 2 choose differentiation point at time t minus 1 when entering at time t minus 1, then the company chooses differentiation point and imitation point at time t, and then sets its price to maximize their profits. So if companies differentiate, then prices rise. But if they imitate or they are imitated, then prices fall. So the price is determined by a balance or composition based on the average or isometric mean of the widths or range between the differentiation point and the imitation point. So as shown in illustration 1, company 1 differentiates to the left and imitate to the right, vice versa for company 2. Therefore, company 2 differentiates to the right and imitates to the left for the differentiation point of company 1. However, because companies incur costs depending on the extent of differentiation or imitation. They are unable to engage in unlimited differentiation or unlimited imitation. So their profit is revenue minus marginal cost, differentiation cost, and imitation cost, depending on the extent of differentiation or imitation. Moreover, in addition, companies face the following two straightforward economic trade-offs. As differentiation increases, then the price rises. On the other hand, as differentiation decreases, then the price falls. And the second trade-off is about demand. And as the price falls, then for consumers, demand will increase. On the other hand, if the price rises, then the demand will decreases. So these are very straightforward economic trade-offs. So based on these, this system of equations, I would solve this system. But because the system cannot be solved algebraically, so the solutions are obtained by numerical computation. As a simplified example, if the initial differentiation point is at 0.25 and that this utility and cost efficiency are all the same, that is, then the companies choose the differentiation point at 0.1090 and the imitation point at 0.8384 and obtain their profit at 0.3421. In this model, the values of any differentiation point and imitation point vary depending on initial conditions and parameters in this model. So allowing the model to capture different degrees of product similarities and differences across industries. Next, I organize some findings from the comparison of solutions. Specifically, I compare profits not only when both companies conduct both differentiation and imitation, but also when either one or both companies conduct only differentiation or only imitation. This process is a little bit complicated, but we can extract the following simple implications or findings as follows. If both companies do not imitate each other, if intellectual property rights or collusion are valid, then they can maintain differentiation and just gain greater profits. However, if only one company imitates, the profit of the imitating company will increase, but while the profit of the non-imitating company decreases. Therefore, both companies generally end up imitating, generally end up to decide to imitate and thus decrease profit. That is they are facing prisoner's dilemma situation. However, both companies gain more profit by conducting both differentiation and imitation than by doing nothing, as in the previous period, t minus 1, because the profits at t minus 1 is 0.25. So this is smaller than the profit in the previous slide. Yeah, as I mentioned already, the new profit is 0.3421. So this is bigger than the profit, that is 0.25 at time t minus 1. So consequently, we can say as follows: through both differentiation and imitation, the industry's products become more diverse while also becoming more standardized in their product characteristics. So this correspondence, or this is equivalent to the dual aspects of the industry as defined in slide 6. The industry is a group of companies that sell differentiated product characteristics. At the same time, they sell products with similar product characteristics. So now, through this model and solutions, we can make the same situation of an industry as defined in slide 6. So we can replace the results as follows. Differentiation promotes product variability by enhancing each company's uniqueness, whereas imitation fosters product standardization or commonalization by increasing similarity among companies. The balance, however, can differ across industries and even among the companies within the same industry. So more case studies are required to determine whether industries or companies tend to become more homogeneous or more heterogeneous relative to one another. Especially in the context of industrial development in emerging economies, attention should be paid to the impact of entry timing on this balance. This is because differentiation and imitation costs can maybe become sunk costs, so thereby functioning as barriers to market entry against latecomers from emerging economies. So we can capture, or we can illustrate the problem, fundamental problem for latecomers or companies from emerging economies in terms of sunk cost in this model. And specifically, I'm working on the following studies. One is to calculate technological distances, like different product characteristics between companies based on patent data. I'm calculating with my co-workers, co-authors. And two is to analyze the relationship between market share and product characteristics and an ongoing project. So I would be happy if I could comment from you. And in addition, I hope this study proves useful for your research as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kimura. This was an interesting presentation, particularly about farm strategy, what they should, whether they would imitate or differentiate their products from the others. And now I request Professor Uday Bhanu Sinha to make his comments. Sir, would it be okay if you limit your comments within, say, 12-15 minutes?
It would be less than that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor Kimura, for the wonderful idea of how to measure and how to look at the competition when the farms are allowed to do differentiation as well as imitation. Can I just request the IT to allow me to share my slides from my desk? That would be helpful.
So you can share, sir.
You can share.
Okay, very good, excellent. Okay. Yes, can you see? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, and then other distinguished the scholars in the audience, thanks to ISID for inviting me to do this discussion. The paper is good and technical in nature. It is in the Hotling model, and I will be restricting myself to part of the extension that is possible with a better understanding in the interest of the audience, and make some remarks at the end. Okay, so. So history of technology and economic development, if you look at it, the most technologies, most advanced technologies are typically developed in the north, that means in the industrialized countries, okay? And they own more than 90% of the world patent. And developing and emerging economies always depended on northern technology, okay? And the way they were used to access this technology is either through technology transfer and diffusion. So those happened historically over very long period in the history. Now, technology purchase, imitation, imitative innovation, and basic research, these are the options of the countries which are technologically backward. Okay, so the literature that has evolved historically is that what kind of technological contracts are based, whether the contract can be such that the imitations are avoided by the southern firms, okay, and what they can do or cannot do, and in the process, we end up getting into the arena of what is known as intellectual property rights regime, which was typically by regulation was to stop all sorts of imitation by the southern firm. Okay, and that might lead to whether the technology gap is larger or the southern firms will be undertaking fundamental research and bypass this the restriction on imitation to develop newer technologies. It's a matter of empirical research, and many people have tried to work on that. So this is more or less the general perspective that historically the southern firms, they have relied on the northern firms for all sorts of technological help because the technologies were mainly developed in the northern countries and they own the maximum patents in the world. Okay, now let me just go into what I heard from one of my professors, the example of Hero Corporation. Okay, the Hero, they are the big name in the motorbike industry in India, and for a long time they were also a partner of Hero Honda. Honda is a Japanese company, and that's how all the Indian roads were flooded with the motorbikes. Almost every other house will have some product of either Hero Honda of the previous vintage or the current Hero motorcycles. Okay, so this story I heard in the mid 90s or maybe late 70s from my professor, Professor N.S. Siddharthan, that the owner of that Hero Corporation at that time went to the Europe to scout for different parts because he had an idea that he wants to develop motorcycle. Okay, and then in the process he gathered many parts from the different markets, and I heard that in one of the airport he was having excess baggage and he didn't have enough money to pay for it. So then he was putting some of the parts inside his coat pocket. That was the story of Hero Honda Corporation, later and earlier Hero, of beginning a product called motorbike for India. Now, why it has to be different? Because remember, the motorbike of advanced countries will be on high track, very well developed road. And India, if you want to develop a motorbike, it has to adjust to the local condition. First and foremost, in the 80s and 90s, there will be plenty of potholes on city roads. And if you are going to the rural areas, there, then the bike has to run over all the fields and everything wherever possible. So there is no road practically. Okay. So that was the idea. So how the wheel size will be, what kind of engine will be appropriate and all that. So the idea was, in those days, the India was trying to develop through what is known as imitative innovation. Part of it was imitation, and part of it was that you have to adjust to the local conditions in terms of the adaptation. Okay, so that was more or less the story, and that story was quite vivid in my mind because that was I heard it 25 years back, but I've never forgotten it. So now coming to Professor Kimura's lecture, what it does. Okay, so it talks about a hoteling line where there is the market size is given in a linear city 0 to 1, and there are two farms which are located, say, at left hand side at the position of Ni and at the right hand side at the position of Nj. This is the initial condition for the farm. So the products are differentiated based on their location they have chosen. Okay, now they have the option of imitation. If they use the option of imitation, both of them come closer. So you can see that two triangles have moved closer. So that the green ones are the after imitation with delta I is the distance traveled by both of them, and they came closer. Now the beauty or the effect, kind of characteristics of the modeling model is that if the products come closer, the competition becomes intense, and as a result, price will fall. Okay, and as a result, the profit of the farms will come down. But in the process, given the price is falling, so it is not always clear whether the consumers are benefiting or not. That would depend on the exact location of these two farms post imitation. Now, think of differentiation. Now, differentiation is the situation where both the triangles are moving away from each other. So the location of the farms are, sorry.
No. No, sir, you can continue.
Okay. Okay. So the location of the farms are going away from each other. So they are moving away from each other. Now, what's the advantage of this? Advantage of this is that competition becomes softer. Okay, because they are more differentiated product going away. As a result, they don't have the head-to-head competition. Competition becomes softer. As a result of this differentiation, the tendency of the market structure is going to lead to higher profit for both the firms. Okay. So now we have the following kind of numbers that I have actually taken from Professor Kimura's paper, that suppose I imagine now that the firms are making a choice about whether to imitate or not the product that is produced by the other firm. Okay, and this imitation is not the entire product imitation, it is some characteristics of the product. So imagine that if you are in a mobile phone, so someone has some additional extra facilities or camera or WhatsApp application or something, you are being another seller also want to mimic that. So it is not a complete imitation of the product, but coming closer in terms of mimicking or imitating some feature. Now this biomatrix tells you that both the firms from I and J has the option of either to imitate or not to imitate. Okay. Now you can see the payoffs that I have written. Now these payoffs are all taken from the calculations of Professor Kimura's paper, but the payoffs are not actually available in the paper, so I had to keep it in terms of a notation. Now these notations tells you that the payoffs for these two places will be somewhat lower than what is 0.2414. So if my opponent is imitating, then it would be better for me to also imitate. So the Nash equilibrium of this choice of imitation, where there is no differentiation taking place, then will be that both the firms will imitate each other based on his numerical calculations. And as a result, there will be a profit for both the firms which are lower than the profit when both of them can commit to each other that they are not going to do any imitation. Okay, so that was 20.25 and here it is 0.2414. So this is the idea of the prisoner's dilemma, that both of them will tend to imitate each other and leading to a situation that they will have some worse outcome as compared to their initial situation when they were getting 0.25 as their profits. Okay. Now I move on to the case of differentiation. Now differentiation again, if I just formulate the game in terms of the two discrete choices that whether to differentiate or not, then these are the payoffs that I have again tabulated from the paper. Okay. And what is happening here, that this pi I n d d, when the other guy is differentiating, it would be in your interest to differentiate and go to 0.3622 because that's a greater number. So if you suitably replace this particular payoff, then you will know that this particular game will have an equilibrium where both the firms will be differentiating. And this is indeed in this model is the best equilibrium. Okay, given the choices of the firms are either to do imitation or differentiation or both. Now I'm moving on to the next one where both differentiation and imitation are taking place. So here the firms can choose to do both or none. And again, I don't have the payoff for this NB and BN. So this is again, Professor Kimura can tabulate this, what are the payoffs like this. And then I can clearly see that again, the equilibrium will be that both of them will do differentiation and imitation together. So both firms will be doing this, both options. Okay. And that would lead to a somewhat better situation as compared to the pure imitation case, okay, that it was 0.2414, okay, but that is worse than the differentiation case because differentiation case was giving me 0.36 and here I am getting 0.34, okay. So this in a sense gives you the idea that if it is possible for the firms to actually give up the option of imitation and only stick to differentiation, it would be better for the industry as a whole, for both the firms in terms of getting greater payoff. Okay, but one way that if they can, the one problem with that arrangement is that that has to be a cooperative arrangement, and if they cannot agree individually, both of them has unilateral incentive to actually imitate the other's product. Okay, so that's the problem, and how the problem is sometimes solved by external agencies. If there is a strong intellectual property rights protection in the country, there the imitation is not allowed by the regulation, then both the firms will feel better and they will be ending up what is the only and the best option is the case of differentiation, and that will give them the highest possible payoff. Okay, so now coming to the some of my observation after stating that what the model is doing and what are the results that model is establishing. So these are some of my little bit of remark that imitation of product characteristics or differentiation doesn't change the willingness to pay in a hoteling model. Now, this is a deficiency of the hoteling model that we typically imagine that the market is fully covered. We never look at that even if the product characteristics are more or the quality of the product is enhanced, that the consumer has better willingness to pay, and that can be partly captured by the firms because of this price competition leading to the indifferent consumers position, and that leads to the payoff. Okay, so these additional characteristics of differentiation can only give you less price competition, but in terms of quality that is not captured in hoteling model. So a better model should be that where which also has some quality dimension along with these product characteristics which are in terms of differentiation only. Now differentiation and imitation together in the model of hoteling doesn't make a difference because of the simple reason that what matters is the net effect, because as you have already seen, the movement of the product in the location space was one towards left, another towards right. And finally, when you are doing differentiation and imitation, it is your final position in terms of the left and right movement that would matter. So in a sense, that kind of overshadow the true aspects which can affect the firm's profit when they actually go for differentiation and mimicking some more characteristics of the rival's product. Okay. So IPR post WTO prevents imitation to a large extent. So any model which has this imitation has little bit of a scope for criticism, that if there is a strong regulatory framework in the country, then imitation would most probably will not be an option for the firms. So my suggestion would be to extend the Singh and Vives differentiated product model with vertical and horizontal differentiation, and that might be an attractive model to explore the issues that are explored in this hoteling model with respect to the differentiation and imitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sinha. First of all, it helped a lot for us. It helped a lot to us because better understand the paper. And also probably it would have, these comments would be helpful for you. So
Yes.
now I request Dr. Risha Chawla to make her comments.
Thank you, Dr. Kimura, and thank you, Uday sir. It has been a pleasure to listen to both of you and to understand more of the theoretical part, because I am mainly going to look at the applied side, that is, what is the paper giving to an applied economist. Because whenever we are looking at some applied work, then we are told that there should be some theoretical backing behind it. And when simultaneously we look at some theoretical paper, we also expect it to throw some light on the real world dynamics. So that is what I'm going to focus on, because I'm not so qualified in terms of the theoretical aspects. So that is what I would like to mention at the outset. Now, you have basically said that imitation is possible, right? Imitation is possible in the model. And it seems as if both the firms are symmetrically placed. We do not get to know whether market power, because you're also talking about product differentiation. So we do not get to know whether market power is more concentrated in one firm or the other, specifically since you focus on two firms only and do not go beyond that. So it becomes slightly difficult to understand what kind of industry are you mentioning, though you do mention in your conclusion that there should be some case studies or some empirical validation for what you have done. But I find that I'm happy that, in your slides, I could find some examples of firms, but they are just not there in the paper. So it becomes very difficult to identify the industry. Yes, the hoteling model is there, and you can go back to what you have learned in classroom about the hoteling model and the ice cream vendors and the location and the product characteristics, and then the quadratic cost functions and the two-stage game that has been followed later on. But still, it leaves a lot to fathom from the paper in terms of these aspects, especially because when you talk about imitation, then, as sir has already mentioned, there are impediments to imitation. And as I read somewhere that imitation is the best form of flattery. So imitation is likely to be more innovative industries. And there you will have the patents, as sir mentioned, there will be copyrights, and there will be secrecy also. So how does the firm just bear an imitation cost, which is, like it just comes like a marginal cost? Like, in your profit function, you find that the costs are there, that marginal cost is there, a differentiation cost is there, and an imitation cost is there. Though you do mention that there are going to be, the relative costs are going to matter, but they don't come in the form of barriers to entry in the model. And also, when you look at the firms, there will be some firms which are going to lead, by way of the product configurations that they are offering. For instance, it could be Apple or Intel. There could be others like Microsoft, and there would be others who are trying to imitate, but they may be able to do a absolute imitation, or they may be doing a partial imitation of the product. So that aspect also does not come out that prominently in the paper. Then you may also think of looking at sustained competitive advantage, like you are basically saying that firms are going to differentiate their products, and they will also be able to imitate. But then what about those industries where the comparative advantage just remains, the competitive advantage just remains despite the imitation? So how do you explain that kind of behavior? For instance, even in Formula One, you will find that there will be some players also that they are just going to be there in the market. So how does that kind of industry get explained? Then you have mentioned about the sunk costs in your conclusion. Now, okay, you have said in your presentation that the differentiation cost and the imitation cost are like a sunk cost, but that aspect does not come in the beginning in the paper. The word does not come. It is basically the marginal cost and then the other two costs. That is what I maybe I am missing out something, but maybe that is what I thought. And then when you are talking about in the conclusion again, you come to the developing economies, right? Though you've mentioned in the beginning that there are going to be the advantages of backwardness and the disadvantages, and now from a two firm setting which is based on the hoteling model premise, where there is going to be, what shall I say, there is going to be a spatial pooling kind of thing, I am unable to understand how to come to the developing economies context immediately when we are not even talking about trade, because imitation will be one of the main variables which are going to be considered when you look at trade. For instance, I just looked at a paper by Schmidt 1995. So they are considering those aspects as well, that because you cannot from that kind of a model you cannot just come to the developing economies context immediately. That is what I found, that a discontinuous thinking how to relate the two, because your conclusion seems to be more what shall I say, one is more receptive to the conclusion, the discussion, one is able to get more out of that. But from the model, I feel that if you could have given some more examples and maybe also consider the dynamic aspect, because when you're talking about the developing economies and you say that there is going to be an imitation kind of thing, then a dynamic aspect immediately means that there are going to be informational spillovers. So how do you incorporate that in the model? It appears that there is just a t-1 and a t, and everything happens in that time period only. Like if the firms, the first mover and the second mover, they just know how to just go about it and choose their relative positions on the linear domain. And so this is what I feel maybe considered if possible. Then as far as also mentioned about the consumer welfare aspect, the quality of the product, maybe you have focused more on the firm behavior, so that is why that is not given that much emphasis. And then when we come to the policy aspect, the policy aspect is completely missing. There is no competition policy, no innovation policy, no firm strategy. So how do you relate to that? Because from a theoretical, because as I'm saying that I am coming to this paper with this thought that when I do something empirically, I am told that I'm not referring to a theoretical model. When I refer to a theoretical model, I find it does not, it doesn't collude with the real world scenario from my own understandings. So I find a disjoint between the two, and then I feel helpless because I read the paper, but I don't get what I am for an application. Because you said in the your last slide that I hope this will help in your work.
Yes.
So many of us are doing empirical work, and I happen to look at your a page on your IDE website, and I find you've done a lot of empirical work. So I thought that if somebody has done, then maybe they can just align that with the case studies and all, because it's not like somebody who has not got into that literature. So you have already got a lot. I was looking forward to reading your other papers also when I saw you have done so much extensively on FDI and other areas also. So this is something, and then you have taken the parameters, like you are saying yourself that I'm doing a numerical calculation to simplify things, right? But in that simplification, I think it has gone overboard. I mean, the simplification part, because you say that I'm going to take these very values, these are my parameters, and then this is the profit that I get. But I mean, even when I was doing a theoretical model, there had to be a simulation kind of work to substantiate the prediction that you are getting. So maybe, as I said, I am not the expert in theory. So please take my comments in that consideration only. I am looking at it from the applied side more. So this is what I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like to respond now?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Shall we take some more questions? Then?
At first, I want to say thank you very much, Professor Shinhan, Dr. Chawla. This is a very valuable feedback to me and to my future papers, because at first, Professor Shinha reorganized my calculation processes and results in terms of the bi-matrix formations. So the bi-matrix formations helped us to understand my paper. Thank you very much. So based on his reorganization, I want to reorganize my paper based on his tables. And as Professor Shinha put my paper on the broad studies about the hoteling model or vertical and horizontal differentiation, he cleared my points in the literature. So, of course, my paper is based on very limited conditions. As Chawla said, my model has only 2 companies. So in many times, I have to extend or relax my conditions to expand my model and to make my model help to applications for policy implications, or to better understand the industrial development, because this model has only 2 companies. So I have to expand the number of companies in order to better understand the industrial development process from these models. Yeah, thank you very much. In addition to Professor Shinha, from Dr. Chawla's comments, I could learn many application possibilities by expanding my model. As you mentioned at first, in the context of emerging countries, to clarify some policy implications or some strategy implications for companies, I have to expand my conditions, or I have to focus on some specific conditions to clarify the fundamental problems of companies in emerging economies. In addition to it, in order to extract some policy aspects, this paper has no policy implications, because I just wanted to reproduce the definition of industry. That is, the industry has 2 aspects.
That is
So,
very useful.
So
The way you
this
define,
is
yes,
a very
yes, yes.
objective
Yes.
to in
Yes.
my model.
Yes.
So I skipped to extract some policy aspects. But if I mentioned about the economic growth in emerging countries, I have to focus on this topic in terms of policy implications. Yeah, thank you very much
Thank
for your comments. This is very valuable for my future research. Thank you very much.
So any more questions or comments from the floor?
Yes. There's a comment on the chat.
Please read. There is a comment in the chat. Interesting paper. I understand that
The
the
limitation cost and differentiation cost as sunk cost. The question is whether differentiation follows rotation, that is other two costs incurred sequentially.
the question is whether the, okay.
Maybe on your screen.
I couldn't find the chart.
I think to my side invites.
So there,
Can I
is there,
is there a question?
there is another question, you take this up also. This
Uh,
is whether there is any sequence between imitation and
Yeah, yeah.
differentiation.
yeah.
But Rina has one question.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Kimura, for bringing this very interesting paper. My question is also from the practical side. So, how do you distinguish between innovation, I mean pure innovations and differentiation? That is one, and it is very important how we are capturing innovation, product differentiation and imitation in when you are doing empirical studies. So how this I think this question is important in the context of patenting or the everlasting evergreening of patenting and those kind of issues when we deal with. Actually, in the developing countries context, I think many times it is difficult even to distinguish the innovative product from the copy or imitated products. So from that context, that question comes. And the second question is that suppose one firm is having a lot of cost advantages, like in terms of, I'm saying not in terms of imitation or product differentiation, but from other side, like for example, maybe the human the cost for labor may be very low, so or maybe they may be having raw material access. So all this may result in their cost competitiveness, which may outweigh the cost competitiveness in terms of imitation or product differentiation. So in that type of a situation, how do you place your model? That is the second question. I hope you understood.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the normal cost competitiveness itself may outweigh the imitation or the product differentiation cost. So in that case, how do you place your model? And the third point is, I think you are, as you said, the time duration. Sometimes the duration, the time limit. So all the imitation may not happen in the same time, and also it is possible that when the firm imitate the market, the product for that market itself, or the demand for that product itself may get outdated because of the maybe the fastness of innovation, or the new products may be introduced very fast. So in that context, so how do you take into account those things? And my fourth point is related to your location. When you're saying you have mentioned about the location, I think in India also, most of even for the groceries now we are using online platforms. So how do you take into account that kind of a market system in your location, locating the firms? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. At first, I want to answer to the chat. Yeah, in this model, companies decide differentiation and imitation at the same time period. So as you mentioned, because as I said, imitation will be precondition for further differentiation or innovation. So as you said, I have to expand or reduce my conditions in this model. I have to incorporate the concept of sequenceless of differentiation and imitation. Yeah, thank you very much. This is very valuable comment. And thank you very much, Lina-san. Yeah, you mentioned 4 points. These are very important to develop my model. At first, as you mentioned, innovation and differentiation is actually different. But in my model, I used innovation as the same as equivalent. But if I would like to express innovation truly, I have to incorporate the concept of vertical differentiation, as mentioned Professor Shinha. Yeah, but this model totally focusing on horizontal differentiation. So you are right. This is there is no difference between innovation and differentiation in this one. Yeah, thank you very much. And you are the second, third, fourth points are all related to my conditions because each parameter are given exogenously from outside the system. So of course, if I set some parameters, depending on the conditions you mentioned, I can calculate the specific solutions based on the stories. If you focus on cost competitiveness in terms of labor cost or in terms of entry timing or differentiation timing, but these important coefficients are totally exogenous from outside the system. So at this moment, I can't answer explicitly to your questions, but incorporating your comments, I have to extend my model. Thank you very much.
Any more questions?
I'm not sure whether this question would be pertinent for your paper, but I'm just thinking since you have 2 firms, you're discussing about 2 firms in your model, 2 firms. So would the technological level of both companies matter? Because in terms of like influencing the pace of innovation, pace of differentiation, pace of imitation, wouldn't that be a factor? Because you're also considering the time element in your model. Like the time team previous, I mean, the lags you are considering. So wouldn't the pace be a factor here? Should be considered or not? I'm not sure if it would actually be relevant for your answer.
Yeah, so as you mentioned or you questioned, my model is not maybe applicable to specific or real industries. So your question is about
How is the technological level be? I mean, is it captured anywhere?
technical situation is decided exogenously from the outside system. So
But what she's asking whether that influence the outcome
Pace
of the
of
model. The level of technology between the 2 firms, whether that influence the decision towards differentiation or imitation or not.
The technological situation or the amount of experience is accumulated by companies influence on the imitation cost or differentiation cost. So, so if a company accumulated many experiences in R&D economies, in R&D activities, then the differentiation cost will be increasing. On the other hand, if a company is not familiar with the technology provided by competitor, then the imitation cost for the company will increase. So the technological situation, overall technological situation will influence on both of differentiation cost and imitation cost. So you can set or you can choose the level of differentiation cost and imitation cost depending on the real economic situations before calculating this model. But I'm sorry, this is extremely exogenous.
Any more questions or comments? If none, then we may close this discussion. Thanks once
Thank
again,
you very much.
Dr.
I do
Kimura.
appreciate.
Thanks,
this opportunity.
Professor
Yeah, thank
Udayan,
you.
for his excellent comments, and thanks to Dr. Isha, and also those who participated in this seminar and participated in the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.